obfuscation attack and 1 imitation attack. In the 15 subjects that participated the first time, it only took them between about 30 and 50 minutes to actually do the full participation, so it shouldn't take too much of your time if you are interested in helping out. I'm sorry? I'll get to that. And some optional information that we'll have in there is demographic information, because we want to see if, in addition to the actual identity of the author, maybe you can extract the gender of the author, the age of the author. There is actually research out there showing that you can quite convincingly figure out if a male or a female wrote a document, for example. And in Alice's case, Alice publishing against Bob, the abusive employer, this could be a big problem, because if Alice is the only woman at Bob's company, even if she hides her writing style, if she wasn't able to hide the fact that she's a woman in her writing style, then Bob could still potentially identify her. So we want to see if this is possible to detect and possible to hide. Another optional part is a verification passage, where you actually write another untampered passage on your own accord to make sure that we can also identify that as you. And some second imitation attack on an author other than Cormac McCarthy. And there will be an author of your choosing, as long as you can point us to a large sample of writing by that author that we can use and process, then you can write an imitation attack for that author. So we are just in the early stages of data collection now. We're just starting this, but please tell others. One thing to keep in mind is that we are not web developers. That's not our strength. So if you do find bugs and problems in the form, please send me an email. Please send Dr. Greenstadt an email and help us fix it so we can get this data collected and out to everybody. But we'll be continuing to improve the form. For now, the project is English targeted. But you can participate if you want to do so in another language. We do want to have lots of other languages involved, but right now we have the hurdle of not really knowing what authors to propose for imitation attacks for other languages. For now, if you want to participate in another language, just when you are on the imitation attack part, instead of imitating Cormac McCarthy, tell us who you're imitating. Tell us where to find their information. And also, we're open to suggestions, maybe after the talk, if you have suggestions for authors in certain languages. For a future version of this form and future versions of this study. So yeah, it's English targeted, but yes, it is open to all languages, and please participate in whatever language you feel comfortable doing so. We will also be releasing the original data set. So when we started this study, we didn't quite anticipate the results that we got, and we didn't really think it was going to get much public attention, so we didn't get approval from the participants to publish their documents originally. This was short-sightedness on our part, but we have since obtained consent from over half the authors, and hopefully we'll be obtaining the consent from more of them. And we're going to put those up on our research group's website in the first week of January, so you can all go on there and take a look at the data and read all those great stories about how people wake up in the morning, and do your own work on it if you want to, and study it on your own if you want to. It'll contain the original sample passages, the obfuscation attack, and the imitation attack from all the participants that consent to us publishing their study. And that's another thing to remember when you're participating in the online, if you decide to participate in our study, is that we are going to be making this publicly available. So be sure that the writings that you submit as the background passages are things that you are comfortable being published. We will not be attaching your name or any identifying information whatsoever to it, but simply by the nature of the study, you can see that it is possible to actually figure out who you are from the writing sample. So be sure that you are comfortable with that. So yeah, but this information will be available in the first week of January. So just 2 more slides. Future work, we wanted to see this tested on more stylometric methods. We want to see imitation attacks against more authors. We want to look at the effectiveness in unique domains, as I mentioned earlier. What happens when you look at a very specific domain? Is it still effective? Extracting additional demographic information. If people hide their writing style, can you still figure out what their native language is? Can you figure out what gender they are? Things like that. We would like to see a better demonstration of effective unsupervised stylometry to really make the case that that anonymous forum scenario is as threatening as we believe it could be. So in conclusion, this is not the end of stylometry in sensitive areas. Some people have posed like, said, well, now you can't use stylometry in courts. It's not necessarily true. I think if in those cases, you'd have to make the case that the document could have been modified or would have been modified. But certainly there's a lot of room for exploration here and a lot of room for debate in how it applies to sensitive areas. Stylometry is very useful. There's a lot of good things that can come from it, but it can pose a threat to privacy. And if you are trying to maintain a level of privacy or anonymity in publishing a document, you should be aware of it. But attacking stylometry is a viable way of preserving your anonymity. And there's a potential for an arms race here in developing new attack-resistant methods of stylometry and then new attacks to get around that. I think that there's a lot of work that can be done in figuring out stronger methods of stylometry and also work that can be done in figuring out AI-assisted ways in having people combat those methods. So now I'll take questions. There's a few articles here that you might go to if you want more information about stylometry. You'll see our research group's website, psal.cs.drexel.edu. And also the top article is an article that a new scientist wrote about our original research paper that kind of deals with it in a little more layman's terms if you want to share with people that are maybe not as technically savvy as this audience. And now I'll take questions if anyone has any.
Well, thank you, Michael. Before we go to the questions, I'd really like to ask the people who stand in the doorway, please come on in or go out, because if something happens, nobody can get out. So please come in. There's more space between the last row, and you can stand over there. Okay, any questions?
First of all, thanks for talking about your research. I found it quite interesting. But I was also surprised by the size of the research, or the volume of participants in the research you've shown. How does the current state of the research, how effective is that in the presence of millions of authors? And also, do you have, I mean, you certainly do have access to corpuses of documents with millions of authors and mailing lists, forums, so it's not like this data isn't available.
To address your second question first, we do, I mean, yes, there's plenty of corpuses out there with millions of authors, but there are not corpuses with also associated attack passages, which is what we were trying to do. We don't have, for example, I don't have any writing sample from Cormac McCarthy where he tries to not be Cormac McCarthy. And that's our goal in our research, is to actually get a large number of data that is untampered and also an associated attack passage that people can use to further research stylometry and further research adversarial stylometry. As for your other question, as to how does it deal with millions, as you can expect, when the number of authors increases, the effectiveness of stylometry goes down. And a lot of the original research in stylometry only looked at 2, 3, 4, 5 authors. But now, not in our paper, but since our paper's been published and around the same time, there are other methods that are looking at 25, 50, 100 authors. So no, we're not up to thousands or millions, but we are up to hundreds. And there are many situations in which just hundreds could be threatening against potential privacy.
But I guess the implication is another way to hide the author is to hide in a group of millions.
Sure, yes. But that is not always an option, right? Because if you are publishing something about an organization in which there are only 100 suspects or 50 suspects, then you could still be, under threat.
Okay, thank you. The other mic.
Hi. Is it working? Yes. Regarding your Google Translate attack, which failed, have you also tried translating only once? So writing in the wrong language, and for example, if you want to post something in English and you start writing in German and let Google translate it to English, have you looked into that too?
No, we haven't, simply because we don't. Our research group doesn't have the. We don't break any American stereotypes here, in that we mostly only speak English. So that is something that's a very good idea, and I'd be curious to see. And I guess if you or anyone would like to help with that, please send me an email, and we can try that as well.
Thanks.
Good idea.
Is there a threshold as to when the source text is obsolete? My English is my second language, and over the previous maybe 3 or 4 years, I'd say my English has improved drastically. So I was wondering, is that threshold perhaps lowered when people